interested? Can we not support people with disabilities?
Senator van Turnhout.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Minister. And I'd also like to welcome John Dolan from DFI, who's also joining us here tonight, as well as the aforementioned people. I'd like to focus my statement on what I believe are three fundamental failings of the provision of disability supports and services in Ireland. One, the currently no independent inspections. Two, the 1.5 billion of the health budget spent on disability services, which is allocated to the service providers rather than the individual. And thirdly, Ireland's current capacity laws, which date back to 1871. And each of these is totally unacceptable and leads one to question, what have we learned from our egregious failings towards vulnerable groups in state care in the past? I think we can all agree that the only way to ensure that we never repeat our past failings is to understand why they happened and for current and future policy to embrace what we learned. And this is exactly what the recent Amnesty report in plain sight, responding to the Ferns, Ryan, Murphy and Cloyne report, sought to identify, and actually was encapsulated by its Executive Director, Colin O'Gorman, when he said, "The past only becomes history once we've addressed it, learned from it, and made the changes necessary to ensure that we do not repeat the mistakes and wrongdoing." In fact, the Plain Sight report identified a number of causal and contributory factors to the institutional abuse of children in the state and church-run institutions, which unfortunately I see as being equally as valid in today's debate. The absence of the voice, the absence of statutory inspections, deference, and the need for the state to operate on behalf of the people and not interest groups. What is fundamental here is that while the debate we are having is in the context of disability supports and services, it isn't really about disability, it's about justice, it's about equality, and it's about human rights for all of our citizens. So my first issue is in relation to the regulation and inspection of disability services. Recommendation 11 of the Ryan Report Implementation Plan states that independent inspections are essential. So let me just quote from the implementation plan, but I'm going to just take one liberty of substituting the word children with people with disabilities. But this is what we've learned. And it says, all services for people with disabilities should be subject to regular inspections in respect of all aspects of their care. The requirements of a system of inspection includes the following. There's a sufficient number of inspectors. The inspectors must be independent. There should be an objective national standards for inspection of all settings where people with disabilities are placed. Unannounced inspection should take place. Complaints to an inspector should be recorded and followed up, and inspectors should have the power to ensure that inadequate standards are addressed without delay. Minister, we're all aware of the commitment in the programme for government, and we very much welcome the commitment to put the draft national standards on a statutory footing. And in fact, the second progress report on the Ryan Report Implementation Plan, which was published last year, notes that a new target date of the fourth quarter of 2012 has been set. But this report also says, the Implementation Plan Progress Report also says, the commencement of the Health Act 2007 by the Department of Children and Youth Affairs to allow the independent registration and inspection of all residential centres and respite services for children with a disability is contingent on the aforementioned action being taken. So we still have not learned from our past. We still do not have it in place. So I'm going to ask the Minister, when will the Minister be in a position to give the necessary mandate to give the legal power to HICWA to inspect the centres? And in my research, I was appalled, and I hope the Minister can show me the evidence that this isn't right, but there has been no official audit of the number and location of centres that are actually there. So we actually don't know where all the centres are. We don't know who all the centres are. Now, I'm appalled to find that out. Also to explain, Minister, why interim measures such as instructing the HSE and the Social Services Inspectorate to commence inspections of centres where children with disabilities live have not been put in place until the inspection of children's services and disability services is operational. The second, which many of my colleagues have already raised, is the individual resource allocation system. We need to provide an individualised budget, and I think everybody agrees with this. But we've spoken in the past about deference to the state and the church. But what about the deference that people in receipt of disability services are forced to pay to the HSE and to the service providers in circumstances where they're unable to question or provide any input into the services they receive, where they receive them or who provides them? and even hearing of cases where an individual has chosen not to avail of the services, and yet the services make a payment to the state service provider. So the state is paying for a service that has not been accessed. It doesn't make sense. As the system currently operates, it seems that people with disabilities are expected to feel lucky and grateful for the supports and services they receive. These supports and services are provided by the state because we value all of our citizens and recognise that we have different needs at different stages of our lives, and our system should reflect this. The third issue I'd like to address is the modern capacity legislation.
1 minute left.
No problem. Modern capacity legislation. We're all very aware and welcome commitment in the programme for government. And I just would like to give you a quote. I'm not going to rehearse what's already been said, but in one of our briefings, we very clearly showed why the law is so archaic. Frida Finlay, chairperson of Inclusion Ireland, described the situation for herself and her daughter. And she said, as a parent of a 38-year-old woman with an intellectual disability who is a citizen by birth of an independent, sovereign republic, I burn with anger every day at the thought that her capacity to make basic decisions about her life is governed by an act signed into law by Queen Victoria and brought in by Gladstone's government 140 years ago. I think the failure to repeal this law flies in the face of Ireland's commitment to the right of all people in Ireland to live with dignity and exercise self-determination. And just in conclusion, look, we all know what needs to be done. What we don't need is more reports. We don't even need more debates. We don't need pilot projects. We don't need think tanks. We need action and implementation. And that's why I really do note my disappointment that an amendment has been tabled by both the government and by Sinn Féin, and I'd really urge my colleagues not to push them to a vote. I believe that the debate put here this evening and the original motion that was tabled should be a catalyst for change. Let's show this to be a Senate motion. It doesn't have to be an independent group motion. Let's collect around this motion and make it a Seanad motion, and let's show a strong sign of unity this evening. And that's what I urge you, my colleagues. Thank you.